Hi everybody, this is Kent from Man About Tools, and in today's episode we're framing the shed extension. In the last episode we poured the concrete foundation. Here's how the framing will go together. The frame of the shed will have 3 2x4 walls. The long wall faces east. The north wall is beside our rainwater tank, and the south wall will have a door. Rafters will hang from a beam lag-bolted to the existing shed wall. Plywood and a metal roof will go over the rafters, and then wall sheathing and a door will finish the shed extension. I'll start the framing with the long wall on the east side. I'll cut the top and bottom plates to length from 2 pressure-treated 2x4s that were 16 feet long. I need to mark the hole locations for the anchor bolts on the sill plate. I propped up some 1x8s against the foundation to act as stops. That way I can align it along the outer edge of the foundation wall. And a tap with a mallet indents the top of the bolt into the wood. I'll use a drill guide with a 3/4 inch bit to drill these holes. Now I can test fit the sill plate on the foundation wall, and if I'm lucky it'll drop right into place. I'll now mark the stud locations on the bottom and top plates, and I can clamp those together so I can mark them both at the same time. I don't need a pressure-treated 2x4 for the top plate, but I found these 16-footers to be cheaper lately than the regular 2x4s of the same length. I wanted the studs to be all on 16-inch centers, but I messed up my anchor bolt placement when I poured the foundation wall, so there's a couple of studs that will need to be moved slightly from this standard spacing. But that's no problem. With all my studs cut, I can assemble this first wall. I tacked on the foam sill gasket to the sill plate with staples. This kept it from shifting when I lifted the wall into place. Using my nail gun would be faster, but for this small project I decided on using self-drilling screws. Gives me more flexibility if I screw something up. And sure enough, that happened on my first wall. I'm going to blame the extreme heat for this, but it's probably more inexperience with framing than that. I assembled this wall with the sill plate the wrong way up, so it ended up not flush with the outside of the foundation as I had planned. It was a quick fix, and I was then thankful that I used screws. I had 2 temporary braces ready and clamps close by to hold this wall vertical while I plumbed with a level. I ran in some screws, then removed the clamps. The diagonal 1x4 will keep the wall plumb north to south and stop it from racking. Now I'll secure the wall to the foundation with washers and nuts. This will be the wall at the north end beside the rainwater tank, and it went into place without much fuss. The south wall with the door will be added in a few pieces. For now, I left the sill plate the full length and bridging the doorway gap in the foundation. The door framing will be attached to the rafters, so I can't finish this wall just yet. The next morning, I started by adding these overlapping top plates to the walls. Maybe you're like me, at home a lot more lately, and want to build some more storage space, or make your existing space that much more efficient by expanding it into something slightly bigger. And that's the idea with this extension off the back of this shed, that I can take all the stuff being stored in my workshop and tuck it away here, so I will have more workshop floor space for future projects. And some of the steps involved in building this shed extension I've covered elsewhere on my channel, like making concrete forms, pergolas, pavilions, garden structures, and other outdoor carpentry projects. There's a 2x6 beam that will support the rafters where they meet the wall on the existing shed. I laid out the location of these rafters and the anchor bolts that will attach this beam to the studs behind the siding. For attaching the rafters, I'll use these ridge rafter connectors, and I'll screw them to this beam before I lift it into place. I have limited clearance below the existing soffit, so it's way easier to do this now. I marked a level line on the wall for the bottom edge of the beam, and here I'll screw on some cleats to hold the beam while I run in the lag bolts. I'll set this first beam in place and slide it to my overhang mark on the north end. The structural lag bolts are self-drilling, but I was worried about splitting the old 2x4 studs in the existing wall, so I did drill some pilot holes for them. And the second beam goes in just like the first. Now the rafter ends are cut and slid into the brackets, and 4 screws secure them. Where the rafter sits on the wall, I'll secure it with galvanized hurricane plates. I was happy with the first 2 rafters, so I screwed in the rest of the plates. I sight down each 2x6 to find its crown and check for warps or cracks. Then I set a cut rafter on top and copy the end cuts onto it. Using a pattern rafter like this made the layout of the cuts way faster. Then, one by one, I lifted and set a rafter into the bracket and butted it into the beam. Ran in the screws through the ridge rafter connector, then did the same at the hurricane bracket, and repeated this for the rest of the main rafters. The 2 end rafters will have an angle bracket on the top of the wall instead of the hurricane tie. Now I'll finish the framing on the south wall around the doorway. I'll set a double 2x4 in place and mark it where it contacts the rafter. Then I'll notch the end 1.5 inches deep, the thickness of the rafter, so the outer end of the door framing is flush. The other side of the door frame is assembled with spacers and secured to the existing wall and sill plate. And that notch or lap will make a secure connection to the rafter. Now the door header is leveled and screwed in. With that done, the sill plate can be cut and removed from the doorway. I screwed on 2x4s across several rafters as a temporary support for aligning and positioning the gable end rafters. I can clamp them in place and then run in some screws. The other end of the rafter is screwed to the end of the beam. Normally, you would cut a bird's mouth on the rafters where they sit on the wall. The slope of my roof is only 7 degrees, or 1.5 to 12, so I decided to just add these wedges to the gaps under the rafters. It looks like it should accomplish the same thing, as I found it to be tedious to cut a shallow bird's mouth. I'll add blocking to fill the gaps between the rafters at the top of the wall. This also plumbs or corrects any warped rafters. I cut these blocks to the exact space between the rafters where they meet the wall and then tap them into place. Then run in 4 screws. And that's all the blocking in place. I added some 2x4 blocks between the outer 2 rafters. This ladder blocking will add support for these outermost ones. My roof is exactly 16 feet long, so to support the ends of the first two 4x8 sheets of plywood, I added some 2x4s between the centermost rafters. That's it for the framing. The next video will be posted here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.